Hello and good morning friends. Welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to carry forward our series on Indian writing in English translation. And under this series, today we are going to talk on one of the most interesting topics. The topic is Vedas, what we can learn. Yes friends, you might be wondering what we can learn. So if you're ready to learn, then we would like to tell you all that for this discussion on the topic, we have once again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Anand Prakash is a retired professor from Department of English, University of Delhi. Friends, if you want to ask questions on today's topic from Professor Prakash, then do call us right in the studio. You can contact Professor Prakash through our toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1800-110-430. This is the number through which you can talk right in the studio. But you are requested to call in the last 10 minutes so that the lecture goes uninterrupted as well as your queries are also resolved. So let's welcome Professor Anand Prakash once again, and let's wonder what's there in the topic which says Vedas, what we can learn. Hello sir, welcome to the lecture.
Thank you, Geetika, and welcome viewers. And this topic is of great interest for all of us because it talks not merely about our history, it talks about the origins of history, origins of culture, as it might be recorded in a literary or an aesthetic or a philosophical or a poetic literary work. So far as Vedas are concerned, it is claimed that human civilization, in fact, human existence begins with them. When human beings appear on the earth, are spotted on the earth as moving around, then they have a language. They are equipped with language. And that language initially captures all that human beings see around them. And the first instances of what they saw, what they felt, what they confronted is recorded in the Vedas. When were they written? That's a good question. Vedas were not written, in fact. Nobody wrote them. There's no author. They are authorless texts. So the knowledge, because Vedas means knowledge, the root Sanskrit word for this is vid, which means knowledge, knowing. So the knowledge that is there in the Vedas, where did it come from? You can ask this question from yourself. I can ask this question from myself. And we can all, guess the answer. Not that we have the answer, we can get the answer as where they came from, or who wrote them, or who composed the hymns, songs, chants, and verses that are found in the Vedas. I will not give any definitive answer to this. I have no answer to this. But then some people claim, and perhaps rightly, that Vedas are not writing. They are shrutis. They were heard. Somebody spoke and others heard, and what heard is recorded in the Vedas. Then if they are not literary texts, if they are not religious texts, if they are not texts about human life, then how do we discuss them under this course? Well, this course is titled as, has been said, that Indian writing in English translation. Is it writing? Initially, I would say, no, it's not writing. Vedas were not written. They were heard. But then, whatever is heard later on gets written. And today we have the Vedas in the text form, in the textual form, and it is there in English translation. In fact, there are a number of English translations available today, and these translations have been worked upon by scholars in the modern era of our history. And there are different versions. You read the Vedas. The Sanskrit in the Vedas is not the Sanskrit that we know. It's a different kind of language. In fact, when one reads the Vedas, when one grasps the information, the feelings, the ideas that are there in the Vedas, then one realizes that language is not fixed in the Vedas as it became fixed later. We have rules of grammar. There are rules of grammar observed by Sanskrit scholars. They in fact evolved the rules that came later. But so far as the Sanskrit in the Vedas is concerned, Since it was sound patterns that came and they were later on recorded, therefore one can say that the language is evolving all the time. It is changing all the time. It is developing all the time. Its power to capture is experimented with all the time by people, and when they capture it, then things are said, and then it becomes a part of the Vedas. So, so far as Vedas are concerned, there is no fixed language as such. We'll come back to this point again and again, but at the moment, let's say that Vedas initially were Shrutis. Who recorded them first? Once again, no clear answer. But legend has it. The belief is that the first compiler of the Vedas was Vyas himself. Vyas, who wrote Mahabharata. And this person, if there is a person like Vyas in the actual sense, then somebody called Vyas, somebody working under the name of Vyas, compiled the Vedas, collected all that was heard by others earlier, and then it was given that written form. So this is the belief. This is what we hear, and well, we can accept or reject it the way we like. But then Vedas were available in the written form much earlier than thought. In the present form and the translation part of the Vedas, where they find a different language to capture them, make them available to others, not merely in India but elsewhere, would have been the Indologists in the late 18th, early 19th centuries. And then the German Indologists, they worked very hard on Indian texts, scriptures, Indian religious texts, philosophical texts, and it is at that time that a kind of authoritative version of Vedas was attempted, and the attempt still continues. And some of the translations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which have established themselves as authentic, are by, for instance, Sri Aurobindo. There are translations available. In fact, when I was just having a look at the English translations, then I used the Aurobindo text. There are other texts available, and which shows that this particular set of books is there to inform us in a very concrete sense about what might have existed at that time when the Vedas were sung, Vedas were chanted, and all those things. So I start with this brief idea, but there are lots of information that I'd like to share with you in the first part of this lecture, and later on, we can go into the nitty-gritty of themes, of questions, of issues that are raised in the Vedas, or that we can raise for ourselves to understand and learn from the Vedas. When were the Vedas then heard for the first time? Once again, no answer. People believe that Vedas would have been given this form that we know around 5,000 years ago, much before Christ is born, much before Buddha is born, much before any epics were written. In fact, language at that time was forming itself. Human beings didn't have any institution then of the kind that we have today. There was no organized way of reading, studying, arguing, composing, communicating. There was no system as such. So people saw and they spoke, and what they spoke was heard, and what is heard is there in the Vedas. 5,000 years ago is just a convenient figure. Human beings would have spoken some language even 10,000 years ago, even 15, 20,000 years ago, a language through which they could communicate with others and establish a bond with them. We can all guess this. But then language served a very vital organic purpose, unlike the language today. Today we are very conscious about the use of words, and this consciousness has a good aspect because things become standardized, and what I say is available to you in some form and you understand it. But earlier, at that point of time, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago, there was no such system of language. So people saw and they wondered. They saw and they clapped. They saw and danced. They saw and became angry. They saw and became helpless. And these celebration, helplessness, some kind of transcendental or mood of elevation. All these things were there and for the language to capture, and Vedic language captures these states of mind, these ideas, these feelings, these emotions that human beings underwent at that point of time. Then when were they then heard, or when people came to know that these things have been heard? Then since history doesn't tell us anything, so we can say that we can talk only about those texts of the Vedas which are available with us. We will not go into the history of it. When they were written and when they were visualized, all these things are in the realm of the possible, in the realm of the probable, in the realm of guessing, and we can just connect with that through the text that we have available with us. So I would say that Rig Veda, as everybody knows, is the oldest text, not just in India, but in the context of human history. And there are epics available in other languages, in European languages. Vedas are pre-epic. In the epic, you have the tale of a king, you have the tale of a community, you have the tale of an excursion, you have a tale of some kind of a campaign. And since they are big things, therefore people want to sing about them, talk about them, make them available to others later on. That is what the epics do. But what is there in the pre-epic? In the pre-epic, human beings could just move around and wonder. And they would look at a thing and they would be surprised as to what is happening. They would then ask questions. And if the questions were not answered, then they would say, okay, there is a bigger power in front of us and we are supposed to pay our respect, our obeisance to this power. So they would sing. And that singing is available. Those chants are available. And there is a lot of poetry in the Vedas. People, of course, today there is so much of understanding about the fine aspects of language, and people will straight away say that they are the source of knowledge, Vedas, because the word vid is there, from which vidya is derived, and knowing is derived. But people today say that Vedas do not contain knowledge. Knowledge comes only at the moment when Vedanta occurs. When Vedas have been read and when people have thought about the Vedas and themes and issues addressed there, then only people will start thinking. So there's no thinking in the Vedas. Nobody asks questions. Nobody enters into a dialogue and into an argument. Nobody explains. Nobody gives examples. Nobody tells anything. They simply live sounds. And therefore, one of the ideas that occurs straight away is whether Vedas are words or Vedas are sounds. It's a very tricky question to ask, because if the Vedas are sounds, then you know that the sound perhaps is the origin of life. Initially, human beings would have heard certain sounds. There was no language. And these sounds later on followed some kind of a pattern. They started being used by human beings. Human beings communicated through sounds, like the drum beat is a sound, a shout, a kind of humming is a sound, and these sounds would communicate quite a lot, and sounds in fact even today also communicate from a distance. So that's why the word nad is there, and that word om is there. Om is not exactly a word, it's a sound, and it connects with something bigger than itself, and that's why it's at the center of the earliest Veda, that is the Rig Veda. So these sounds, because they can only be heard, they can't be seen. A sound cannot be seen. Therefore, what can be heard? Then later on, through the repetition of this sound, and that hearing starts creating meaning out of the pattern that sound has. Maybe language developed that way. So if you read the Vedas, what you can learn from the Vedas is that you recognize the nature of sounds, and when that nature is recognized, then of course you have insight into what can be called language. So imagine, if you want to really understand the nature of language, then go into the Vedas, read the sounds there, try to see what meaning is being created, and that meaning later on is added to by other people who use the verses, use the sounds that are there in the Vedas. And sound is a great source of knowledge. It's a great source of being. You live in the sounds. If I make a sound, if I make a breathing sound, if I call out somebody at the time of distress, if I just tell somebody through a sound that I'm happy or unhappy, then see the enormous possibilities of sound helping us in different ways in communicating with the rest of the people, in having a kind of connect with a large number of people around us. And if people have memory, and all human beings are equipped with this particular agency of memory in our minds, therefore what sound was heard by me today can be communicated as a part of the memory of the person who has heard it. This person will tell, maybe I'm 80 years today, 90 years today, 100 years today, and I may have a sound, and that sound is heard by a young man of 20 years. So this person will live another 70, 80 years, and then he will communicate that sound to others. So Vedas perhaps existed in this form before Rig Veda also would have been put together in terms of its verses. So these sounds were captured, they were memorized, they were reproduced, they were passed on from generation to generation. And when even the Rig Veda, which is 5,000 years old, even when the Rig Veda is visualized as a text, visualized as some kind of a group of verses, then you know that these sounds would have been passed on from generation to generation before finally somebody thought of compiling these sounds in the context of Rig Veda. So how far can we go back? Well, you can't specify. It can be 15,000, 20,000 years ago, because there is a generation that has memorized these sounds, maybe in the form of music, maybe in the form of repetition, chanting. You chant with some kind of a rhythm, and therefore music, chanting is important. And through that, it is communicated. And the oral system, the system of creating a sound and communicating through the sound to others, this system operates in the Vedas in a big way. So this is another point that I would like to make about the tradition of the Vedas. I'll just make a few more points, and then we can think of specific things. So I just ask a question at this point of time. If they were heard, then did somebody create a sound? Who this person would be? Who created a sound? Human beings were there, animals were there, nature was there, storms would be there, trees would be there, wind would be there. All these produce a sound. And those who believe in religion, we believe in some kind of agency outside humanity and the world, this person can say that maybe something called God created a sound, and that sound was heard. But interesting thing is that in the Vedas, there is no one supreme God. There might be representatives of nature. For instance, there is water in the Vedas, and people see the movement of water. They hear the sounds created by the movement of water. Water falling in a waterfall from a mountain, from a hole in the mountain, it might then travel from the mountain in the form of the river down into the valley, and this movement creates a sound. And human beings at that point of time, you don't see the nature of the river, what its function is, start thinking that it's a god. So there is no God as such with a capital G, but there is a God with a small g. This God is water. And therefore, human beings who see the movement of water, its circular ways, its trickling, its power, its noise, and its gurgle, then they say that it's perhaps a person like us. We can't see him otherwise in the human form, but maybe there's a bigger human being or a bigger figure hidden somewhere behind or within the water that one sees. So therefore, it's a god. So water then in Sanskrit is Indra, it's a Devta, and human beings at that point of time start worshipping Indra. Oh Indra, you are like this, you give us this much, because it's because of you that we are alive. You give us crops, you give us this, you give us that, you give us sense of color, you give us sense of movement, and we know the way through you, We know that when we go down, then there are trees. When we go up, there is snow. All these ideas. Isn't it fascinating? To talk about water in these terms. Water, as the kind of role that it plays in our lives, and it fills us with happiness. It also fills us with terror, with fear, and we shake. Sometimes water is so ferocious that a part of the earth gives in, and they are things rift apart from within, and there is a large scale devastation, and then human beings would say at that time, 10, 15, 20,000 years ago, that God is angry, Indra is angry. So now our job is to placate him, to praise him, to flatter him, because we are weak and he is strong. And therefore, let's praise him and he'll be happy. Everybody is happy when I praise my neighbor at that point of time. Then the neighbor is happy, he starts smiling. So I'll praise this God. And in fact, Rig Ved uses the word Rik. Rik means praise. So it's in the praise of gods. So water is there in this form. Water is useful, but water can be dangerous. And therefore, I have to somehow harness the energy, the quality of this God for my personal purpose. So see the poetry that is hidden, in the way the Vedic, human being in the Vedic age would look at Indra, visualizing him as a god, and this God has all the qualities, and therefore there will be a large number of verses in praise of Indra at that point of time. Another god can be then, because the human beings in those days lived in the forests. I'm not a history scholar, so I'll just tell from whatever little I've heard. And human beings earlier lived in the forests, and forests generally give us life. They give us fruits, and it's because of the forests that we are able to sustain ourselves. And but suddenly one day we realize, the Vedic person realizes, at some point of time, once again it can't be specified, but the person realizes that today the forest is angry. And what is the anger? What is the form of anger? The form of anger is that things have become hot, and a kind of fire has emerged, and it has started burning the forest. So forest is, at this point of time is ablaze, is burning, and because it is burning, therefore, if you come in contact with it, it will kill you, it will burn you, and it can burn even the upper layer of the earth, and nothing will grow there for a long period of time, and it can burn the trees, it can burn human beings, it can burn animals. And it's difficult to live in a forest like that. And the forest fire can remain, let's say, for 6 months, for a year, for even more. And devastation at the level of nature would have been such in history that whole forests were burned down, and then the remains of the trees they were covered by earth or soil, and it became coal and all. If you try to understand the nature of earth and the nature of history through the earth. So you see how the earth is formed and all these things. So the burning occurred, then the trees were turned into coal, and then the soil covered them, and after another, let's say, 10,000 years, you could see that the coals were not seen, and this is how a different kind of power is visualized by the person living in the time of the Vedas, that there is a power which burns, and this power is called Agni. So the poet, the writer, the singer, the person who chants, this person would start treating this as another god. This is god Agni. So there will be large number of verses in praise of Agni also. So the points are two. One is that whatever is powerful, whatever is inspiring, whatever is terrorizing, whatever is able to that which is able to affect our lives, influence our and conditions our existence, that thing would be more powerful than us, and therefore this person will be considered a god. So this is what Vedas tell us. This is what we learn from the Vedas. Not that we learn any philosophical system from the Vedas, because Vedas are pre-philosophical system compositions. And we have to recognize this, that was the time when human beings did not live as a ruler, a ruled, a cook, a protector, a person who went around as a journeyman. These things were not available. There was no teacher, there was no student, and there was no powerful person, and there was no weak person at that time. All of them, looked not within themselves or around them. They would always look around for these gods to come and help. Or if they devastated, if they killed, if they maimed, if they punished, if all these things happened, then they would just be obedient to them, and they would start praising them, so that the specific god is placated, is set at peace. So the next time when the same thing is apprehended, is feared, then this god will see, okay, these people were quite happy with me, and then they tried to flatter me, they supported me, therefore I will not touch them. I will touch other people, maybe I will touch their enemies. So see the fascinating aspect of human life 10, 15, 20,000 years ago, and this fascination is captured in the form of verses, in the form of songs and hymns that are available to us through the Vedas. So this is the other thing that we can think of. And let me, by way of information, because later on I'll talk about the significance of some of these things that I've said in the form of information. Then I would say that there are 4 Vedas. First, the Rig Veda, and this is the biggest, the largest Vedas, and this is the most authentic. And in fact, a large number of verses that are there in the Vedas are reproduced, are allocated space in the other Vedas. The other Vedas are Yajurved, Samved, Atharvaved, and there are 4 Vedas, that is. And Yajurved would have something to do with the Yajna, that you have to perform something. There is a ritual that is to perform. And Samved, under the ritual, you also require, let's say, some kind of a singing, some kind of a beat, some kind of a rhythm. And music is a very good preserver of sounds. So one can say that those sounds which are there in the Rig Veda, they are then sung, set to music, and the Samved is that way very close to creating some kind of a rhythm and a music out of the verses that are there in the Rig Veda and Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda comes at the end of the Vedic tradition. And I was surprised, when I was reading something about the Vedas, I was surprised that people don't pay much attention to Atharva Veda. They say that it's about the world as such. It doesn't talk about knowledge. It doesn't talk about things which should inspire us. But I found when I saw certain hymns of Atharva Veda, I realized that it was telling us a lot of information about nature, about the quality of things that are available in nature, about the suffering, the pain that the human beings suffer, and then the human being would move around and say that maybe in nature there are remedies available of the ailments, of the illnesses, of the imbalance that is created in the body of the human being. And a large number of verses in the hymns in the Atharva Veda, they are devoted, unlike to Agni and water or Vayu. Vayu is the wind. A large number of verses in the Atharva Veda are also related to the herbs and shrubs, the medicines, and the unknown, invisible things. So somebody falls ill, and why this person would have fallen ill? Then it is visualized that maybe that there is some devil that is there, in a corner of the forest, or there are certain old things lying there. Water is collected, and this water go near it, and you fall ill. So maybe some demon is there, some devil is there, and that devil is working to our disadvantage. So Atharva Veda talks about this, and also tells us later that if you observe these other principles or rituals, then you can be cured of your illness that has afflicted you. So people say that it doesn't give us any knowledge, but I thought that perhaps it gives us more about the life that was lived by the people at that point of time, and not in the form of celebration, but in the form of necessity. People had to live, they wanted to live, they could not live for long, and therefore they sought help in the natural world. So this is a kind of journey I took along with you, viewers, and through this we know, in the manner of a telltale method, something about the Vedas, and we realize that they are the origins of our civilization, the origins of our cultural life, and that they are great examples of poetry. And this we have to learn from the Vedas. And in the next part of the discussion, we'll take up a few questions. I'll just raise a few questions for my own, act of elaborating things. I would like to share then some of the perceptions that I have about the Vedas, and we'll that way try to make sense of what is available in one of the most precious sources of knowledge, Vedas. Thank you. Welcome back, friends, to the second part of the lecture. In the first part, I shared with you some information regarding the Vedas, and that information was of a general nature. I introduced the concept of the Vedas, how at a particular time they emerged in human history, and later on they became subjects of discussion, subjects of appreciation, through which we could learn about the ways that humanity adopted so many thousands of years ago, and how they are still relevant to us in terms of poetry, in terms of sources of knowledge, in terms of inspiration and associated things. This was the first part of the lecture. In the second part, I'd like to raise certain questions regarding the Vedas, and these questions, have to be understood in the context at the time when Vedas were composed in the oral tradition. I will now, take up the question of appreciation of the Vedas in terms of the oral tradition. How is oral tradition important in human history when you talk? In fact, oral tradition is a very powerful tradition in human history. When you talk, then you enact a scene. When you talk, then you talk to somebody else. So, the oral tradition presupposes that there is a whole group which is waiting for hearing you. If I had to speak and I have an audience in front of me, then I would speak in a particular manner. I would all the time be conscious, that what I say makes sense to the person or to the people who sit in front of me. Therefore, that thing will work, as a discipline on my language, on my presentation. At the same time, maybe I want to say something, I want to speak something, and I want to speak not to others but to myself. Therefore, the same oral tradition can become very soul searching. I talk to myself, I ask questions from myself, and myself means my psychology, my moral system, my ideas, my philosophy, and then, because when I am talking to myself, that talking can be overheard by somebody. In fact, this is the principle, let's say, of drama. Something is happening on the stage, and on the stage different characters are using voice, not writing. They are using voice, and they are communicating with one another on the stage. But there is a whole audience that is sitting next to them. The person on the stage does not know that there is an audience. The person on the stage is talking to somebody else, or maybe sometimes in a play the person is talking to oneself, as happens in the case of soliloquies, that you are talking to yourself. But then there is a whole audience, 500 people, 1000 people, even more, which are listening, and all this is oral tradition. And oral tradition is so important that again and again human beings go back to it. Today we have the book, but then that book is dramatized. When the book is there, then somebody reads it out. When you read out, then it becomes oral. In fact, in India, which is a country of illiterates, a large number of people in India do not know how to read and write. So they will not, get much benefit from the books that, we publish, we print. But then let somebody take a book in one's hand and start reading it out to a group of people. And the same book that was earlier there as some kind of an object which was not doing anything to their lives, this book becomes alive. So this oral tradition is very important, and let's pay this kind of a compliment to the oral tradition, that human beings for a long time did not have the printed word, did not have the written word. Printed word would have come much later, but even the written word, somebody writing on tree leaves and or on some kind of paper or cloth, and then that will be preserved for centuries later. This also came much later. But then Vedas are written at a time when there is nothing like printing, there is nothing like writing, there is no script, there is no ink, and the symbols on the paper, on the leaf or on the cloth do not convey anything. But then Vedas continue, Vedas remain. So just see that the world of the Vedas is the world of dynamism, is the world which directly is thought of as a means of communication, by a human being. And this communication is a swara, the communication is a sound. And Vedas, because talk about the sound, so when we read the Vedas, then we understand the nature of the oral tradition. And oral tradition is so strong that today, which is the 21st century, and this thing has been continuing, tradition of creating arts and sharing them with others. And when you today use the drama form, then you use the dialogue form, and dialogue form means swara, the oral. So even the printed word gets converted into the oral form. Or you think of the film, such a modern medium of representation, and this film also has sounds, this film also has words, this film also has songs. What I am saying is that sound that way is inevitable in all human communication, and the source of sound and its importance and its relevance is understood when you read the Vedas, when you hear the Vedas chanted by some priest. So, this is the first point I make, and I say that if the concept of God is there with us, then God would have talked in a language, would have talked in some kind of a system of sounds, and that those sounds were captured by human beings and they remembered them, and then they passed on, as I said in the previous part of the discussion, from generation to generation. So, just see that the concept of oral tradition is deeply grounded in the Vedas, and this we have to learn, that sound, language is nothing but sound. It's a sound that means something to us, but today there are philosophies, there are philosophical systems which say that sounds are merely symbols, sounds are merely signs, and that unless there is a tradition of associating those sounds with something else outside them, you don't have a language. So, in fact, if you want to understand the very nature of language, then you have to go to the Vedas. So, Vedas are that way a source of knowledge. Maybe not directly, not in the sense in which some teacher tells you this is right and this is wrong. So, Vedas don't say this is right and this is wrong. They merely say, I supplicate myself, I bow my head before a God, and this God is kind, but he can also punish me. So, when you hear this, then you also combine it with what I am saying, that it's an oral tradition, and the oral tradition connects us with other people and connects us with the people who are represented in the Vedas. So, a different kind of unity and bonding occurs through the Vedas, occurs through the sound system, and that should be kept in mind, and this is the domain of literature. It also is the domain of science. But then, so far as I am concerned, so far as we are concerned who run this course, this is the domain of literature, that there these sounds are put together in the form of a jumble, in the form of a group, in the form of an associated collection, and when they associate, when they are together, then a knowledge is communicated as well as generated. And this is there, because if there are Vedas, then there is Vedanta, and if there is Vedanta, then people start thinking and talking in a different sense. So, Vedas then remain a source of knowledge. Maybe they are not direct, available. They don't bear witness to the direct availability of knowledge. They talk about forests, they talk about gods, but they may not talk about ideas. And the second point that then from here is that Vedas tell us about the importance of rituals. Vedas are rituals. Basically, when a god is to be placated, when a god, let's say, is to be praised, then the god also requires some benefit out of or profit out of human activity. So, God will be appeased only when there is sacrifice. So, a sacrifice will have to be made, and when the sacrifice is made, when an animal, let's say, is killed and presented to the god as a kind of a gift to him, then God will understand the meaning and nature of the sacrifice with the help of the chanting that will occur in praise of him. So, a sacrifice is done, a ritual is done for that. There is a beginning, there is a middle, there is an end. In the beginning, a power is evoked. In the middle, the chanting is happening, the song is sung, and there are different kinds of people who observe these rituals, and finally the ritual comes to an end. And then the community that sat in the observance of the ritual, this community will feel satisfied that, well, now God is not angry with us. So, just see at that point of time, and this is all. This is not just belief system. This is also history. That in history, people always observe the rituals in order to authenticate things. Even today, there is a ritual of marriage. How come that till yesterday, the two human beings, a man and a woman, were not known to each other as well as they would be known to each other today? And which is that moment, that this thing can be started in their life, then that moment is marriage. And before marriage, these people are strangers. After marriage, these people will unite into one unit you can call it the family, you can call it a relationship. But then turning two individuals into united in the form of a different idea. This would require a ritual, and because otherwise people wouldn't understand when the ritual happened and when the moment was fixed and celebrated. So therefore, there is a kind of marriage ritual, and all of us know that in the marriage ritual in India, among the Hindus, the ritual is always accompanied by some kind of a singing of a Sanskrit hymn, of a Sanskrit song, and the Pandit comes and there is another Pandit that lights the fire, and there is once again a beginning. So this information about the way of life so many years ago, so many thousands of years ago, is made available through these rituals by the Vedas. I can straight away take the example of the people who are a part of the ritual of the Vedic practice, and this, for instance, the ritual that is kept in mind for practice. This ritual has 2 or 3 participants in it. All of them belong to the category of scholars, category of gurus, category of special agents of the social power that is there with them, and function that they will perform in the course of observance of the ritual. For instance, there is an idea called advaryu. There is a concept that is called hota, and there is a concept that is called udgata. These 3 people who are a part of the ritual in the Vedic tradition. And let's think about this. The in charge of the ritual is advaryu. This person is the reigning deity of the ritual. This person first sees to it that all people in the community, all people in the tribe, in the group to which he belongs, are there to watch the ritual. And this person is in a way directing lots of other people to perform certain roles. You must have seen the marriage ritual in which people sit together in the community, and certain functions are assigned to each. And the person who is guiding the whole thing, the master of ceremonies, this person will tell others, now you do this, now you do that, and hold your hands, or stand up, or sit down, or go around, and the fire is lit, and all those things. And even before that, when the ritual is to begin, all preparation is to happen. So therefore, somebody goes to the market, buys the necessary things, brings them along. Then somebody is also at that point of time lighting the fire, and then getting ghee and other important things. So this person who is in charge of the ritual is called advaryu. It is he who will do it. Everybody cannot do it. This is his job, and it is a specialized job. What does it mean? It means that it appears to be only a ritual to us, and some people may say it's an important ritual. Some others say, well, this is just a tradition. But then, at the time when it began, it gave some idea about the power structure, about the concretized role of a group of people. So there were a group of people in a community who would be called advaryus, and maybe there is in a community one person who would be the master of ceremonies to see that all these rituals are performed, and this person would be the advaryu. So you know that there was a time when advaryus were there, and they would observe rituals, and they would authenticate proceedings of life at that point of time. So you have advaryu, then you have hota, and hota is a person who recites the holy psalms, the holy songs, the holy words of praise, the verses. So under the supervision of advaryu, this hota actually is singing the songs, is reciting the song. And then there is actually reciting, because verses are there, and God has to be told in very obsequious terms, very respectful terms, that he is being addressed, and he has to be kind to us, kind to the tribe or to the community. So hota is a kind of a bridge between the community and the God, and the holy verses are then recited by the hota. And there is a third person who is a minstrel, who is a singer, and he is called udgata. In the very word gata, you can understand this person will be singing. So reciting of the psalm is important, and at the same time one has to show that one believes in it, and one takes pleasure out of it, and one is not merely doing a kind of practice of the ritual, but also enjoying the practice of ritual. So these 3 people are required for performing the ritual, and when the ritual is done. So a ritual is not artificial. It is artificial, of course, but then because all of the people of the community belong in the ritual, so they all take it seriously, and they know, that there is a power outside them, the power of a god, and that power, is to be kept in mind. So there is a disciplining factor in the ritual. If you have a ritual, then you observe it, you also believe in it, and see the role of the ritual today. Ritual is there, even in people who call themselves secular. There is a kind of a ritual. On a particular day, a card is printed. This card is sent. It's a ritual. And how do you send the card? Even if you don't believe in this or that religion, well, you go and you wish, and you just visit a person and congratulate that person for something good that might happen, and then you come back and you organize a kind of a gathering. Now, getting the card printed, distributing the cards, arranging a place, and at the time when the people will come, then you make certain things available. Then all this is ritual, and these rituals have their source in the Vedic life. That at a particular time you have to hold the ritual in order to inform people accordingly regarding the change that is going to take place in the life of a person, in the life of a community, in the life of a tribe. So this thing is to be kept in mind. So there is a kind of history that is ingrained in the Vedas, in the rituals that are performed there, and that there are acts assigned to each practitioner of the ritual. And this is what is quite fascinating for us to know, that these kind of rituals are today also there. Maybe the form of the ritual is changed, but the ritual has remained. For instance, when you go to become a student of a college, the first day, so there is a kind of a ritual. You go there, you meet people, and the principal comes and makes a speech, and then you get back, and sometimes the principal also hosts some kind of a lunch for you, and then all this is ritual. Otherwise, the college is not supposed to, the place is not supposed to welcome you like that. But then there is a ritual, and this ritual makes you happy. So what I mean to say is that happiness, seriousness, authentication, legitimation, that you legitimize things, make them acceptable. All these things are a part of the ritual, and the first traces of the ritual, the first examples of how a ritual can successfully be used by a society to spread certain ideas, to authenticate certain ideas, is there in the Vedas. So you have this particular thing, the context of the ritual here, and I thought I should just explain this to you. The third thing that I would say regarding the thing is, I already touched upon it earlier in the context of poetry, but I would like to make some points a little more clearly at this stage. When you, what is there behind the poetry of the Vedas? When you praise Indra, then you say certain things, you use certain metaphors. You talk about the movement of water, its music. You talk about its beauty. You talk about its life-giving thing, quality, and you are showing praise. And the way you are capturing the movement of the water, for falling from a height down below, and you are talking about the drops of water, droplets of water. You're talking about the colors, that the light falls on the water in its flow, and certain colors, emerge in the process, and you start, being happy because there are colors, and there were no colors before, and since there are colors now, so who has made the colors? And so you start wondering. Now see the beauty of it, and this beauty is poetic, and one says, that even though the ritual is taking place, even when somebody is watching the god, in his pristine form, in its true form, and then these things also happen on the sides. That there are colors and there is a music when the water falls and all those things, then you know that Vedas in that sense are a source not merely of knowledge but also of poetry, also of pleasure, also of togetherness, because the whole community is there present at that time, and the scholar, the Advaryu and the Hota, they are saying something, and what they say is available to the audience at that time. They understand what he is saying. Today, when the Ved mantra is chanted, then we don't understand anything. One wishes, that they were available in such simple translation that people would understand what was being said. These translations are there today for the scholars, but the common masses who hear the chanting from the Advaryu or Hota today, then you realize that you don't understand anything. But then, at that point of time, when the chanting happened, many thousand years ago, at that point of time, the audience would understand what is being said about God, about a God, about the God. They understand, and then the glory of the God can be visualized, not merely in what is at the end as conclusion, but in the process of the praise that the Hota or the Udgata or the Advaryu presented for the benefit of the audience. So, this is a source of poetry, not merely in logic. And you know that the kind of powerful poetry that one sees in the hymns and psalms and in the Vedas is hard to match. And you straight away see something grand happening in front of you, and you realize that, well, this God is great, He is powerful, He is nice, and He is going to help us. So all these things, that the source of poetry is very important. The last general thing that I'll say and then finish it is regarding the idea that is hidden behind all these practices. So far I talked about poetry, so far I talked about pleasure, I talked about community life, but then let's think of some idea that is there in the Vedas. This idea is hidden, this idea is not very clear because there is no philosophy here, there is only observation, and there are only rituals, and ritual means repetition of something that happened yesterday or day before, and that ritual still continues in the same form. But then apart from these things, there is also an idea in the Vedas. What is that idea? And there is a scholar who says that the Veda indeed are said to be coeval with mankind. Vedas happened when? When human beings came on the earth, when human beings were created on the earth. I am not very happy with the word created because they evolved, so far as I am concerned, and they are a part of nature, and certain parts of nature evolved in a manner that they became a form of life that can today be called human beings. So whatever, I'm not going to the theories of creation or evolution. What I'm saying is that when human beings emerge on the earth in the form in which we see them today, such a form would have been there in the beginning itself, that at that point of time, Vedas also came. This is an important point. And please think about it, that human beings and Vedas are coeval with each other. They come together. Animals don't talk. Trees don't talk in the sense in which we understand language. But human beings talk and communicate. And when did they start communicating? That very day when they were there in front of us. That very day they communicated. So life and the life of the human beings and their communication, their language, they came together. This idea is captured and communicated through the Vedas. So Vedas appear on the scene as sounds, as rituals, as repetitions. At that very moment, human beings came. Human beings could not do without these things. They could not organize themselves. An individual will remain an individual scattered somewhere away from others. This person will be there. But then the kind of understanding that we have regarding humans communicating with one another, that understanding wasn't there. So when that understanding comes, then language comes, and that language and that condition which is captured through language, that is what Veda is. So Vedas, which means thought, feeling, ideas, all these things, and human beings, they come together. So not that human being initially is an animal and then gradually he learns and all that. No. Human beings are there, they have a language, and then they have Vedas. So this is nice that they are as old as humanity. So if humanity is, let's say, 1 billion years old, then Vedas also would be 1 billion years old, because then the sounds that are there that human beings are creating, that sound is captured by the Vedas at some point of time. And I already told you that this is not a one day's affair. This captures all these things. So they are the source of knowledge. They are origins of knowledge. They are origins of feeling. They are origins of emotions. And at that point of time, ideas, meaning, concepts are not separate as they are today. Today we have separate departments for ideas, there are separate departments for music, there are different things for poets and all. In the time of Vedas, everybody is everything. So all of us are combined in the form of living as human beings. And that is the vision, that Vedas at that point of time present to us for our benefit. And if we learn this message that all human beings are together, and together they remain, a source of information, knowledge, and fulfillment, then a very fine message of togetherness of human beings is communicated through the Vedas. So I finish with this, and I hope, friends, you could make some sense of what I said on the sides, of discussion about the Vedas. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving us a productive session once again. And friends, if you have any queries or if you want to give your feedback for the lecture or you have any suggestions, then do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. The lecture is going to be uploaded on YouTube soon. Keep watching us, keep writing us. We would be meeting again tomorrow and would be discussing on another topic. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.